Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Full and Thriving, the podcast where we dive deep into what it means to live boldly and reclaim your life through mental wellness and healing. I'm Meg McCabe, and today we've got a special episode that you definitely don't want to miss. Have you ever felt disconnected from your body or wondered how tuning into your body's signals could be the key to healing? Well, in today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Saffi Biasetti, somatic recovery expert, psychotherapist, and author. Dr. Ann is here to share how you can befriend your body and build deep body awareness from the outside in through a powerful process called interoception, along with self-compassion, patience, and curiosity. She'll reveal how observing simple things, like how you carry yourself, can unlock a new relationship with your body, and why somatic healing makes the emotional side of recovery feel safer and more empowering. So, if you're ready to learn how to connect with your body from the inside out and take a new approach to healing, stick around. Let's dive in. Hello, Dr. Ann. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so grateful you could join me today. Where are you recording from at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm in upstate New York in beautiful Saratoga Springs. It's about 3 hours north of New York City. And we're having finally some really amazing cooler weather, and fall is starting to hit. So
man,
here. Yeah.
I love Saratoga Springs.
I really know it.
Shows at the Stack Center.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great venue. Go there all the time.
It's one of my favorite spots. One of my favorite shows. I saw like Dave Matthews Band there. Yes. And it was so fun. And I've been meaning to go back because I felt like I was in this enchanted forest.
Yes. It is a great venue. We love it. Love it. That's like one of our favorite things in the summer. And he loves it here. He comes up. He's been coming up to Saratoga for, oh my gosh, I think over 20 years. And he comes every single year. It's great.
Oh, that's so funny. Have you been to a show? A date?
Yes. Yeah. He's amazing. He's amazing. It's kind of like you can't be in Saratoga and not go to one of his shows.
I really want to make sure I do that again because that was fun, and I just love upstate New York. So that's so exciting. I'm glad we have that in common, and I'm really excited to record this show with you today. I feel like you have so much to offer our listeners as far as body image and somatic therapy goes. I can't wait to dive in with you today.
Great.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. To set off the groundwork for the episode, I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal journey and even how you were able to evolve into someone who teaches about befriending your body.
Yeah. Well, it's a long journey, so I'll have to try and condense it. But, I like to just start off by saying, I've been in the field. I'll give just a little professional piece, but then I'll dive into kind of really what frames my work and how I got there. So 34 years is a long time. I've been doing the work for 34 years. I absolutely love what I do. And in these later years, it has turned into really teaching and training professionals and eating disorder coaches in the field now to work with those that are struggling in and with their body in whatever form, relationship with them, their body, food, self, to work with them in a different way. And that is through the embodied door or embodiment. And that really came to be. So I was a clinician for 20 years, clinical social worker for 20 years. And because I had found such a different relationship through my own healing and recovery, and the body was such a central part of that, and I'll say more about that, I went back for many trainings then during that time when I felt that the schooling, the traditional schooling that I had, first of all, you have no schooling when it comes to treatment of eating disorders. That's really something clinically that you have to discover and figure out through additional trainings once you complete, your graduate training. because they really don't teach you anything there. And so when I started doing additional trainings, I still felt like I wasn't impacting my clients in the way that I was hoping to impact them, meaning really, really getting back to a different relationship with their body and food. Instead, it was so focused on behavior, so focused on cognition that I felt that people were left half served. So I understood what that meant, because when I went back after 20 years, I decided to go back to school for my doctoral work. And by that point, I had already been certified, not just as a yoga teacher, but as a yoga therapist. And my particular yoga therapy training was in mind-body connection. It was an embodiment training, a 3-year intensive program. It transformed my life. It transformed my relationship with my own body, even though I had been recovered for so many years by that point. I'll never forget being in my training and saying, my gosh, I thought I was done. And I had been done behaviorally. I mean, I was kind to my body. I wasn't criticizing my body. I wasn't controlling it through external means in any way. I was eating, nourishing myself, but I wasn't in relationship with my body. And that training really exploded everything for me. It really opened up a whole new door that said, wait a minute, now I'm in a different communication with my body. I was communicating with my body on a sensory level, where prior to that, I realized I was communicating only through my mind over my body. So when I went back for my doctoral training, I knew I had to go back to a program that served me a different way. Every time, as a matter of fact, talk about being embodied, every time I started looking at clinical PhD programs, in psychology or CIAYT or what have, I actually felt kind of nauseous. And I'm not saying this to offend anyone out there. This is just my path, that I've learned something different, right? And what that nausea was for me at that moment was I had to find something that was going to fit with what I had discovered, not just about myself, but what I was discovering with my clients, which is that to cross over to the next level of recovery, what I call really embodied recovery, means that they had to get in touch with something much deeper beyond thought, meaning they had to get in touch with their body on a sensory level, on an internal level, and that it had to touch something deeper, whether we call that spirit, whether we call that knowing themselves intuitively, getting in touch with an intuitive sense, a real knowing, whatever you want to call that. I knew it had to comprise a holistic realm that I wasn't going to get in traditional programming. So again, no offense to traditional programming if that's what suits you. It's just that I had grown in a different way. And when I looked back on my years of recovery and when I was struggling as a teen, I mean, we're talking a long time ago now, there was hardly any help in the 80s. We knew nothing. As a matter of fact, those were the years we were still blaming mothers, dear mothers, for anorexia, for bulimia, for binge eating disorder. We were still blaming family structures and everything. And we knew nothing. And we were blaming the individual, and we understood nothing. And it was at a time when I was a teen that I was suffering great loss and grief. I had lost my father passed away traumatically and suddenly when I was 16. And he was ill for a number of years prior to that. But the death itself was very traumatic and sudden. And rather than understanding, of course, I couldn't understand what was happening to me at the time. All I understood was that I couldn't take another thing changing in my life. So that deep, immense grief at that time, really where I felt comfortable, so I thought, right, quote unquote, comfortable in my body, was to go in, was to hold as hard as I could those emotions. One of the ways that somatically felt like it held it for me was withdrawing food and holding it. And even though I knew that wasn't the answer long term, as a matter of fact, it made me feel 10 times worse and 10 times deeper layers of grief and sadness as that was building and building, right, in my entire body and system. But I knew no other way. And what I say now to my clients, which I wished someone years ago could have said to me, was, you know, my dear, what do you notice in what has happened? What has happened to all that grief? Where did it go? Where did it go?
Wow, Dr. Ann, that is truly incredible to hear your path and your journey. And, I first want to comment on how you thought you were completely done with recovery. And then you realized that there was a deeper connection there with your body where you're in a relationship with your body and communication with your body. That's more of a sensory experience. I think so many people find themselves kind of stopping there without continuing that second half of the journey.
Yes.
And you tie it in so nicely with that question, what do you notice in your body? So could you please expand upon the value of that question and how it could help someone kind of bridge into that second piece of recovery?
Yeah, sure. And I feel like, it's worthy to give a name for that second piece because not that behavioral recovery isn't worthy, right? And I just want to emphasize that. But what I mean about that second end, is really embodied recovery. All recovery to me should be embodied. It's kind of not the way we usually do it in the world of recovery, the way it stands now, but it's really that embodied recovery. And that question, maybe if someone asked me that when I was 16, I would have said, I wouldn't even know what you're talking about because at that point, I didn't even know I had a body, right? I didn't even know I had a body. And that is actually often what clients will initially say, like, well, what do you mean? Where do I notice that? And it's up to the practitioner to help someone to know what I mean by that question, So in other words, if somebody is talking to me and I'm going to go back and use my own example for a moment, I know how I walked through the world. I walked through the world at that point with my shoulders hunched over and with my core collapsed. It was hard for me to stand up tall in the world. It was hard for me to look at people, engage with people. So that's how I was moving through the world. I didn't know that necessarily, but if a somatic practitioner, which we didn't have back then, had met with me, my job with my clients is to say something like, I know it's got to be really hard for you to feel like you can face the world, shoulders back, standing up tall, looking at me here. It's okay if you need to look away. It's okay if you need to hunch in too and curl up, right? How many of my clients will come in and curl up like not believing they don't want to be seen. That's the external view. The internal view is that it's too afraid to feel seen. And it's too afraid for us to feel that. And it's too afraid for somebody else to see that, So it's a careful and very gentle invitation in. It's not like, oh, you have to know what's going on in this body. None of us know that until we begin the journey of at least knowing that somebody else sees us differently than just the major presenting piece, which is body image or behavior, what we're doing or not doing, So that creates a very different experience and a much safer experience of going in and beginning curious.
Okay. So when, you ask a client, what do you notice happening within your body? Sometimes a good place to start is maybe noticing how you're walking around in the world.
That's right. Exactly. Or right there with me, how they're seated. If they say, I don't know, I say, oh, well, tell me what it's like if you just roll your shoulders back a little bit, or if you just sit back and feel your back supported by the cushion beneath you, behind you. I don't like to sit that way. It feels too open. What a great awareness. So close up a bit. So close up a bit the way you just were. Does that feel better to you in some way? Yes, it does. Well, let's understand what feels better about that, right? If somebody had discovered that with me at 16, what felt better about that? I felt like I could be safer that way. So this is where we start the conversation. I'm not looking and feeling like somebody has to change that immediately. No, of course not. They're not ready yet. But at least we're talking about the internal experience and not the external experience. And that's my job as a somatic therapist for this particular clientele, for all my clientele, but especially in working in recovery in a different way. I'm bringing them to awareness that they don't yet have.
Wow. Okay. That is so powerful. I think it's such a really great way, direct way to bring up the body conversation.
Absolutely.
It's like, let's start here, like how you're sitting on the couch. Like, what are you noticing now? What about the people who are blatant avoiders of their body? I find that's very common in the field. How can you get someone or encourage someone to connect to their body when they maybe feel this like body hatred or a strong amount of body disgust?
Yeah. So it's actually probably my favorite clientele to being in the world of, my doctoral research was on self-compassion and recovery. And so I like to say that what I discovered through that research, what my participants really helped me to discover, I should say, is how to deliver a path of self-compassion to those who are least self-compassion. So for folks that are really body aversive, like I don't even want to know that I have a body. I just want to come into this room. I know. And I will still speak to the body. So in other words, what I will say is absolutely perfectly fine. That doesn't mean that I will not sometimes address your body because it's in the room with us, but it's okay. You don't have to participate with that. So in other words, if someone says to me, I don't know, I felt dizzy today, or whatever. I skipped my meal plan today, let's say, and I don't know. I'm just tired, but it's not from that. Let's say I may say something like, "Oh, I get it. So you notice that you're tired, but you don't think it has anything to do with skipping breakfast or, not eating enough at lunch or whatever. No, has nothing to do with that." And I'll just say something like, "Okay, I'm just going to say that what happens though in your stomach is that your stomach is confused." The stomach is kind of confused right now. What do you mean my stomach? Your stomach is confused because it didn't receive any food today. So since it didn't receive any food today, it started to signal your other organs that we got to start slowing this system down, because that all your organs communicate with each other. It's not just one in operation. It's everything as a system. So it slowed the whole system down. So the tiredness, just so you know, is due to the system slowing down. So we didn't talk directly her or his or their body, right? I didn't say you must come in this body. But I gave the education about the body. And metabolically, it's correct information on an anatomical physiological perspective. So I just gave information about the body. And so for those that don't want to come anywhere near it, my job as a somatic practitioner is to always give psychoeducation, correct psychoeducation about the body, because that's the one thing I'll say in my office is, well, we're going to talk the truth. So let's really talk about, like, if someone says, no, this has nothing to do with the way I'm feeling, my hormonal cycle and, my, whatever it may, has nothing to do with, the fact that I'm running, 20 miles a week or whatever it may be. I'll say, well, let's hold on a second. Let's back that up because I want to teach you a little bit about your HP access. And let's talk a little bit about your adrenals and your hormones and, and that's where the yoga therapy education comes in a lovely way. Plus many years of studying about, I'm an advanced polyvagal practitioner as well. So many years studying physiology as well. And in all my yoga training, tons of anatomy and physiology. So I love to use that information just to speak the truth about the body. And so that's what I'll often say is, well, that's okay if that's what you believe right now, but my job is to just offer you the truth about how your body operates. And it's okay if you don't want to believe that right now. It's all right. I'm just going to still teach you. It's like sitting in a class that you don't really like. We're going to give you the information, but you don't have to take the notes if you don't want to. But over time, people take the notes.
I was going to say, I find psychoeducation so valuable in the recovery process. I don't think enough practitioners really go in that direction. Sometimes they just assume everyone knows, or it's not necessary. But I know I've witnessed a shift in people when I can bring up some of that, like, science around eating disorders and their body. And so when you present this in a loving way, what have you observed changes potentially?
Oh, it's incredible. As a matter of fact, I will see a softening happen right away. I will see my client back on board with me. So when we say, like the brain noise, the eating disorder brain noise, that comes in and what have you, really all of that is a moment of dysregulation, right? And unsafety. So I like to really emphasize that's really what's happening internally. So when I see my clients first come in and maybe they have a lot of that happening and a lot of that dysregulation happening, and I come in gently with, this embodied self-compassion. You didn't hear me say a word about self-compassion there, but the way it's presented is compassionate. And so what happens in a moment like that is there's a whole softening that happens in the room, and it's not threatening at that point. It really isn't threatening because I didn't say to them, if you don't eat that meal plan, this is what's happening next. I didn't say that. I didn't say any of that. I just gave the compassionate bodily facts. And sometimes I'll load it on a little bit more and say, like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that your stomach is so confused that it shut down your whole energy system. And they're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? My stomach is confused. So that's where the embodied self-compassion comes in, and the softening then comes in. And the interesting thing with that is people don't fight it. They actually want to hear it often, whether they take it or not. And then over time, one day the magic happens, which is when they walk in and start to say, I noticed this. Or like, for instance, I had one young client that, parents put her there, did not want to be there in treatment, and was very agitated about, everything in the beginning, did not want to look at me, did not want to talk to me about this stuff. And we went on and on and on. The softening started happening more and more and more. And it was non-threatening. So she came back, because it was non-threatening. And then over time, came the day that she came in and said, we remember that thing we talked about in the beginning, because one of the things that she recognized was frenetic kind of energy. And I was explaining to her that in her system, that when she wasn't getting enough dense nutrient, that her system was unfortunately moving into a lot of internal autonomic dysregulation, which was amounting to excessive anxiety, agitation, and feeling like she had a motor, quote unquote, in her.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she started on her own, right, beginning to get curious about her food differently, the more we talked like this, she then came into me one day and said, you know what I noticed, doctor, and that thing that we talked about in the beginning, like that's come down. I don't feel that same motor happening. So that now is all that we did in the beginning. Now this client is starting to notice her own sensory experience, maybe not completely yet linking it with, that had to do with the fact that I've been nourishing myself, but that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
And to link it. And so, but she started to come into her own sensory awareness when we make the body a less scary place.
Wow. So I think that's truly a beautiful progression that you're kind of highlighting, where someone can go on this journey to get to the point where they're naturally starting to notice their experiences in the world with the body. How would you explain or incorporate the concept of interoception in this building of body awareness?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically that's all of it, in the world of interoception. Unfortunately, I think we're limited in our understanding of what it means. And most people have partly correct, meaning that interoceptive awareness is the awareness of our internal bodily experience and our internal bodily shifts and changes. But of the inner body, wow, that's like a high level brain concept. And I mean that it's not just a high level brain concept, it's a high level brain function. We can't just happen. So often, out in the social media world, I try and correct that by saying, please don't ask your client about their hunger and fullness cues. They have no clue what you're talking about. That's a very depth experience of interoception. So we have to start in the very, very, very basic interoceptive awareness. So giving psychoed is one way to start the very, very basic dropping in, which is what we call body literacy or body awareness. So if someone doesn't want to be near their body, which most of our clients don't want to be, we have to at least begin to offer them different ways of becoming aware. So everything I just said before, like how they're sitting, how they're standing. I had one client walking on the sides of her feet, rolling out and walking on the sides of her feet and saying that she was so angry with her body because all it gave her was pain. And, we just simply one day, I simply said, I notice your feet roll. What's it like to roll your feet in? Oh, I never do that. Well, what's that experience like, So we've done that a number of times, and this client became aware that I walk in the world always the other way, but was blaming her body as if it was doing this to her, but she had no idea that she could help it feel a different way. So this is the power of embodiment. It's the power of interoception, but we have to start it in the external to go internal. So not in the external as far as image. None of that was about image. It was all about function. It was all about how they're standing, sitting, walking, how they're presenting, and helping them to become more aware on that level before we can start going into sensation, which is internal level. So we have to go in stages, and most of our clients need to stay at the stage of literacy for a long time.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if you've been avoiding your body for potentially decades.
That's right.
That's really eye-opening to just pay attention to the way your foot is turned outward versus maybe intentionally walking more flat on your feet and seeing how that helps you feel in your body. Those very subtle noticings and changes could make a world of difference. So I love that place that you start on the external level. And so when you bring it into that sensory experience, the next path to embodiment, what does that look like?
So when we start to, in other words, when my clients come in and tell me their own body literacy, like, oh, this was hurting me today, or, oh, I noticed that, I wasn't as constipated, or I wasn't as, that's when I will start bringing that question back around again that we started with, which is great. You're starting to notice changes happening inside your body, like your heart rate's calmer, you're breathing differently. So then we can begin to go into what's the experience of that? Like, do you feel lighter when you breathe that way? When your stomach isn't in pain, what's that like? So, this is an important, so we can get a little heady with this. I'll try not to, but on the metaphysical level, right? Meaning the body and then the perception of the body. How many of our clients are struggling because of their unfortunate relationship with food? How many of them are struggling with sluggish bowel? And then they get bloated because gastroparesis causes bloat, right? That's the experience. That's a physiological experience. And then how many of them take that bloat and interpret that as fullness and interpret that as body size and interpret that misinterpretation. So that is it's a piece of interoception that's gone awry.
Right.
So if we can help our clients to see that, to sense that, to feel that, like I'll actually say to them, oh, you're right on. You are right on with the first little inkling of sensation. But then your mind stole it.
Wow, that's so powerful. Exactly. I think I see that all the time. Like the mind runs away with explanations and excuses or whatever it might be, maybe to protect the eating disorder or to protect themselves from eating more or, you name it. Is that a very common experience, you would say?
So common. It's the most common. And that's why, I teach and train interoception across the board, trauma recovery, eating disorder recovery, actually into all my clients. However, I say it is the super skill in recovery. It is the super skill in recovery. And we are gaining some more momentum in research, in this area. It's to me not quick enough. I really think it's, we have to get it moving and to really understand what it is. So my job kind of to professionals out in the world is to debunk the myths about interoception and to slow everyone down. Right? Same with self-compassion, slow everyone down. Like people come out in the world, oh, hunger and fullness cues and, oh, self-compassion, be kind to yourself. Let's do a self-compassionate practice. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like our clients are so far away from that. like, let's slow this down. Somatic work takes everything super, super slow. We slow it down. We take a different pace, and that's how we regulate, in the process by doing that. So we have to sort of back all of this up, and we're on the right path as saying, oh, these things can help and be helpful, but we want to know in what way so that we don't overwhelm our clients in the process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that psychoeducation is really important in preventing them from getting confused about the sensations happening in their body.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes. It's a number one piece because of what we just discussed about how the mind will run away with sensation. So, for instance, in my program that I have, the Befriending Your Body program, the first 4 weeks are central in what I call disentangling the mind from the body. They don't know how to do that yet. The mind immediately is going and making an interpretation of the sensation. That's not interoception. So we have to spend time in opening that up, opening it up over and over again, the repetitive cycle of, was that a sensation or is that something you always think about, that sensation?
I love that phrase of disentangling the mind.
Yeah.
And that sounds like really hard work. Right? And confusing work. Like,
absolutely.
I could see that being really disorienting, kind of like it would take so long to get to that point of disentangling from the recovery perspective.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So it's extremely hard work for sure. And it's effort filled. It's effort filled work, but what part of recovery isn't?
Yeah.
Right. And it's effort filled in a different way than what we often ask people to be, So in many ways, there's actually a softer landing in this, even though it's effort filled. And you'd be surprised at how quickly it starts to unfold and people are like, wow. And by week 5, I hear people start saying things like, wait a second, I'm not sure if that was a thought though, or my sensation. I'm like, what? And I say to them, you can't see me on Zoom, but I'm doing a happy dance, because I'm so thrilled at that point to hear their language like that. And we do have to flip everything upside down. So embodiment work, that's what it does. It should flip things around, because in this world we live in, we center the mind over the body. That's what we've done in recovery, and we've ignored the body. And embodiment work should flip everything upside down. Body should come first. Mind should come second. And so we have a long way to go with that for sure. But I always say in a disordering that lands in the body, it's in the body, not that any other mental health concern is not in the body. They all are, right? There's no separation. It's just that this particular one that our clients struggle with are so body focused as if it's the object of enemy. And the only way we're going to flip that is to turn it upside down so that the body is the central and primary focus first.
Well, that makes sense, because if you flip over the concept of the body being the enemy, you get befriending the body.
Yeah. Takes time to call it a friend. That's okay. But we at least get a body. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the end, we get befriending my body.
Yes, I love that. And so with just one more question to tie all this together, with the emotion that comes into this, how do you help people? I know we're short on time. This could be a whole different podcast episode, but what can someone do to start transforming maybe the emotions that have been locked inside of their body or trapped for a long time? I'm sure this embodiment work can really help release that in many ways. But how can someone start connecting to that emotional component of healing?
Yep. So what happens is, because everything I just mentioned to you, especially the work of interoception, has everything to do with our autonomic functioning. Emotions are only scary and overwhelming when we feel dysregulation in with them. So meaning that chicken or egg, everything goes together. We can't say it's one over the other, but whenever we have autonomic dysregulation and we feel frightened, scared, shut down, all emotion will be unsafe. There's no emotion. I think happiness and joy can feel unsafe in those dysregulated moments, So I always caution that, to say not to vilify any emotion. So we want to understand that when we work in this way, that we're building regulation. We're building regulation. So in building regulation through the body, again, centering the body first, you have by nature, our body by nature is a feeling, sensing entity, meaning it wants to feel. So by nature, when we bring in more capacity at regulation, emotions will flow. Emotions will be. And that's when clients sit there and their eyes start tearing up, and I'll say, something I just said, shifted something inside. So you see, I don't say, oh, what are you feeling? I don't ask that question as a therapist. What I say is, something I just said or you just said shifted something inside so that emotion is now present. And then they're like, yeah, I don't even know what it was. I go, we don't have to know what it was. All we have to know is that emotion is present right now. What's that like? Feels good, releases, or I'm a little scared. Okay. So then you and I will only come as close to that as you're ready for right now. But it's behind your eyes.
Wow. That's a really powerful link, to wrap up this show is that building that kind of like grounding into the body to feel more regulated so that emotions become less terrifying, easier to feel. That is a nice full circle journey you've taken us on your process. I'm so grateful to hear all of this, Dr. Ann. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. Go on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like I've been on a little journey just listening to you today. And for people who are interested in connecting with you or your work or taking your trainings, how can they get involved?
Yeah, sure. So I have two websites. One is anembodiedlife.com. And that is a lot of my professional offerings. And then I have the befriendingyourbodyprogram.com website. And that is the whole program of somatic recovery. And it's also gives all the information on professional training in that program. And so you can find information on both sites. But most of the professional training takes place through the Befriending Your Body program.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a true pleasure today.
You're very welcome. It was lovely to be here with you.
So there you have it. Another episode of Full and Thriving in the books. I want to personally thank you for joining me in listening to today's show. And if you found value in this conversation, I would be so grateful if you could please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave a review. Your support not only helps us reach more people who are striving to live their most full and thriving life, but it also allows us to bring on even more incredible guests with valuable insights that can change your life. Every follow, every review makes a huge difference, and together we can continue to grow this beautiful community. Thanks again for being a part of the journey, and we'll see you next time on Full and Thriving.